morning. It's Bernard Nomberg with another episode of NOMBERG LAW Live. It's Tuesday morning, 10 a.m. Central, and I'm with my good buddy Steve Altmann. Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Bernard.
I appreciate you being with me for a few minutes this morning.
Sure, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Steve is a good friend. I've known him a long time. He is a fantastic attorney in the area of bankruptcy law. Bankruptcy law is a complicated set of laws for even the most learned of people, whether you're attorneys, doctors, accountants, or any other profession that you may have. At some point or another, bankruptcy or the world of bankruptcy may come into your life at some point. We've got Steve here this morning. He's going to go over the different chapters, the different types of bankruptcies, what they mean, some of the terms, and just kind of help to explain what bankruptcy law is and how not to be afraid of what it does. Steve, I appreciate you coming on this morning. You and I have known each other for a long time, got a lot of interest. We'll get to the Braves maybe toward the end of this.
Sure.
But talk to us a little bit about how did you get interested in bankruptcy work?
Well, when I was in law school at Cumberland, my second year in law school, I went to work for Andre Tofel, who is a Chapter 7 trustee, and learned really the practical aspects of bankruptcy, and really became interested at that point and wanted to learn more about bankruptcy through him.
Well, bankruptcy is such a unique set of laws, and it's like what I do in work comp world, tax world. You really have to know those intricacies of the laws. So let's kind of talk a little bit for a minute for the typical person, not a company, but for an individual or for a married couple. Let's talk about the different chapters, the different types of bankruptcies that are available.
Sure. There are the three primary types of bankruptcy are Chapter 7, Chapter 11, and Chapter 13.
Okay.
And Chapter 7, an individual is seeking to get a discharge of all of their obligations. They're trying to obtain, basically extinguishing all of their debts, and it's generally a 3-month period from the time you file a bankruptcy to the time you obtain your discharge. And a bankruptcy trustee is appointed to that case so that trustee oversees your assets to see if there's anything that you have that the trustee can sell to liquidate to pay creditors.
Okay.
And if not, generally those types of those cases are no asset cases, and they're done within about 3 months.
Give a quick example of a Chapter 7.
But generally, an individual might seek to file someone who's maybe lost their job. They've incurred a substantial amount of credit card debt. Maybe they've had some other type of disaster in their life, some medical expenses, and so what they do is they'll have to qualify to file a bankruptcy, and then come to see myself with regard to their with regard to their debt and with regard to their assets, to make sure that we give all the information that needs to be given to the trustee, and then that individual would, after we file the bankruptcy, would obtain a discharge within about 3 months after filing.
Okay, so for a Chapter 7, a person would come to see you, a private attorney who does bankruptcy work. You prepare the petition, you file it with the court. The trustee is a court-appointed position.
Correct.
It's not somebody who represents the individual who's filing the bankruptcy. They
That's
actually
right.
represent the court.
Right, that's
But
correct.
that's also not the judge. That's a different person.
It's not the judge. The
Okay.
trustee is the person who administers the assets of the estate.
Okay, and the assets of the estate could be a car.
A house, and any expensive luxury items. If there's a boat, sea-doos, things like that. If there are those types of assets, sometimes there's money in an estate that if you are about to inherit money, there's a rule where if you inherit money within 6 months of filing your bankruptcy case, the trustee is entitled to those funds if you inherit those funds.
And when you file a Chapter 7 or any of these chapters in bankruptcy court, what type of a court? Where are you pursuing this?
Well, it's in the federal bankruptcy court. It's basically every district in the state has a bankruptcy court. And we're in the Northern District, Southern Division here in
Okay.
and so that's where anyone who wants to file a bankruptcy would actually go and meet with the trustee at that in that case. You don't always appear before a judge. Most Chapter 7 debtors actually never see a judge.
Okay, so that's all right. So that's Chapter 7. You're trying to wipe out your debts.
Correct.
What's
a fresh start?
All right, we'll call that the fresh start chapter.
Correct.
What's the next most common type of chapter where you represent? Just give it a second.
Okay. So when you're trying to represent individuals, the next chapter would be a Chapter 13. Chapter 13 sometimes referred to as debtor's court. Individuals who file for a bankruptcy are considered a debtor. And what that does is it allows you time to repay your creditors, typically anywhere from 3 years to 5 years. 5 years is the maximum term that you can repay. Set up a repayment plan.
Okay.
And you're reorganizing, it's called a reorganization because you're reorganizing your finances in order to repay your creditors during that period. Sometimes, let's say, typically an individual might be facing a foreclosure. They're not able to make their house payment. So if they get 3 or 4 months behind and the lender is seeking to foreclose, they might want to file a Chapter 13, which would enable them to cure the arrearage that they're behind over the life of a plan.
So they're not going to be losing their assets so long as they stick to the plan.
That's correct.
Okay.
And actually in Chapter 7 as well, you typically won't lose your assets in a Chapter 7 if there's not enough equity for a trustee to sell those assets. In a Chapter 13, you're not going to lose your assets either, as long as you keep making.
Just keep going.
Yeah, as long as you keep making the payments to cure the arrearage that you're behind on your house, your car, and any of those items that you want to keep.
Okay. For those of you just joining us or just tuning in, we appreciate it. It's my buddy Rojan over in Mississippi. Good morning to you, sir. I hope you're doing well. We're talking with Steve Altmann. Steve is navigating us through the world of bankruptcy law, which can be a scary set of laws for those of us who are not informed. So Steve, who's an expert in this field, is teaching us a little bit about it today. Steve, if folks who are watching it live or want to get back in touch with you later on in case they feel like they have a bankruptcy case, how do they get in touch with you?
Just contact me on my phone here is 250-8466, or you can certainly email me at saltmann, that's Altmann, at najjar.com.
Okay, and we'll put all of your contact information in the comment section later on. All right, so we've gone through Chapter 7, Chapter 13, any other chapters that are common for the typical consumer or person who may feel like they have a bankruptcy case?
Sure. Well, there is what's called a Chapter 11, and typically Chapter 11, most people might think of that as a case for a corporation. You hear about certainly all the time in Toys R Us and other corporations filing for Chapter 11 to reorganize their debts or to liquidate if necessary. But you can actually also file Chapter 11 for an individual or a consumer.
Okay.
And the reason that you might want to file the Chapter 11 as an individual is if you don't qualify for Chapter 13. Let's say you have too much debt, too much, meaning it's not, there's no collateral attached to it, but the maximum that you would have, if you had more than $394,000 of unsecured debt, which sometimes some people are in business for themselves, sole proprietors, they may have a substantial amount of unsecured debt, or taxes. Sometimes you have a large amount of tax debt. That individual would qualify for a Chapter 11, and it gives you more rules and more allowance of time to repay your creditors. You're not limited to that 5-year period that you're limited in Chapter 13.
When do you see, give us a typical, an example of a Chapter 11 that you've either dealt with or you know about?
Well, I'm actually looking at right now, I mean, there's an individual, a professional doctor that might need to file a Chapter 11 that has a substantial amount of tax debt, and it's payroll taxes that have accrued over 7 to 10 years. And that individual, in order to stay in business and repay those taxes, needs a Chapter 11 to do that.
And that's got to be court approved for
Correct.
for the plan to be established?
For the plan has to be confirmed. The technical term is confirmed.
Sure.
And you have to, there are certain rules in the code, the bankruptcy code, that you have to follow in order to actually file and in order to actually have that plan confirmed.
Okay, so we've gone through Chapter 7, Chapter 11, Chapter 13. Are those the three most common?
Those are the three most common.
Okay, and that's what your firm and you handle here?
Correct.
Okay, and let's just talk about any of the chapters. I want you to share with us what happens when the plan is put in place by the court, but the individual either can't make their payments or stay on the protocol that's being required of them within the plan. What happens?
Well, typically if someone is in Chapter 13 and they can't make their payments, sometimes the individual may have to consider converting from one chapter to another.
Okay.
If they can't make the payments in the Chapter 13, maybe convert to the Chapter 7 and allow themselves to surrender the house, surrender the car, maybe do something else that will enable them to actually afford the things that they want to have at that point in time.
Okay.
Right now, as far as individuals, if they can't make their payments without converting, the other option is simply dismiss their case. A lot of times they'll have other options to try to work out the debt with the creditors. Some creditors are willing to work with debtors on their debts and outside of bankruptcy.
And is it safer to be in bankruptcy when you have that situation, or have you seen scenarios where the parties have worked together and they've actually been able to resolve the issue, the money or whatever may be owed,
Sure.
outside of court?
No, we've worked out a number of cases for individuals outside of bankruptcy. It's not always, bankruptcy is not always the answer.
Right.
And certainly if it's not going to benefit them, we'll work with the creditors. I'll obtain a power of attorney, which I have to have. The credit card companies, mortgage lenders will not speak to me without a power of attorney for the individual. But a lot of times individuals will seek a loan modification. The HARP plans that the home mortgage modification that went into effect a few years back. So individuals can seek loan modifications and avoid bankruptcy, and we can work out some type of reorganization or type of repayment plan for them.
Steve, over the years, bankruptcies, the term itself makes most individuals just kind of shudder. There's a real stigma to being in bankruptcy, and deservedly or rightfully so in certain instances. Certainly, people let their finances get away from them, or certain things happen in life that you just don't have control of. And it may appear to be embarrassing to certain folks. But correct me if I'm wrong here, the reality is if you stick your head in the sand and ignore it, it's never going to go away, and it's only going to get worse.
That's right. It will get worse. And that's where, bankruptcy can help. And I try to advise people that, as bad as that stigma may have been many years ago, the stigma is not quite there like it used to be. And because, people understand that there was a housing crash, years back.
About 10 years ago.
Yeah. And people had struggled tremendously. And actually that was about when there was a bankruptcy boom right at that time.
Apply to individuals, I think, is a very good thing. It takes away some of the scariness of the laws. One more time, if you would, share your contact information for anybody who may be interested in talking with you about a potential case.
Yes. So my email address is saltmann, ALTMANN, at najjar.com. And my phone number is 205-250-8466. and we're happy to discuss
Sure,
anything.
sure.
You know, it's not always about bankruptcy. If it helps, if we can help settle debts or work out repayment plans for them outside of bankruptcy, we certainly will.
Well, and thank you, Steve, for sharing all of that. For those of you who've been watching us, I'm sure you're a little curious as to the sword that's behind us, and Steve knows the story about it, so I'm going to let you share the significance. We're in the Najjar Denaburg main conference room. It's a beautiful room if you ever get to see it. It's really got a lot of history and neat architecture, but you got to share with us. What's the deal with the sword?
Well, Mr. Denaburg, who has been practicing for 60 years, and he's an icon in our community and the legal community.
He certainly is.
But that was a gift to Charles that is Solomon's sword, because Charles is a fabulous mediator.
Sure.
And it was a gift from as a mediator. Solomon's sword is
For the work that he did.
For the work that he did.
Well, it's a fantastic looking sword, and it's a great story. Steve, I really appreciate you coming on today and talking us a little bit through bankruptcy world, which can be a scary area. Hey, Julia, down in the Mobile area, I appreciate you tuning in for a few minutes. Hope all is well down there. Guys, if you have any questions now or later on, please tune in to Steve or go into the comment section if you got questions. One last time, give them your phone number and how to get in touch with you.
205-250-8466. Email address saltman@najjar.com.
Guys, thank you for tuning in for a little bit. I'm sorry if we had some technical difficulties during it, but that's part of going live on the internet. We'll be back again next week with NOMBERG Law Live. You can catch this episode and any past episodes on our YouTube channel, as well as nomberglaw.com, which is our website, and they're also housed here on our Facebook page. Hope you have a great rest of your week. Take care.
Bye.